Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete, joined by Ricardo Martinez-Paz. We have been off for a week. The Eagles have been off for a week. The Steelers are now off for an entire off season. So it's been a little bit of time off, but now we're back better than ever, and we've got a playoff game to preview, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles, who are going to be in the divisional round of the playoffs, taking on their rivals, the New York Giants, in a divisional round matchup. The Eagles coming off the bye. So we didn't really have much to talk about last week, and I was away. I was in Canada, so it was tough for me to do a recording. But now that both of us are back on campus, the Eagles are back in action this week. So we're definitely excited to break down that Eagles game. We're going to talk about the Steelers as well, wrap up their season a little bit, and also talk about the latest going on with them. But Ricardo, an exciting time to be an Eagles fan, man. Playoffs are here, bro. How you feeling?
Excited is definitely one word. Nervous is also the other, especially because we're surrounded by so many Giants.
I'm not getting any audio from you, bro.
Oh, that's not good. Hold on. How about now? No.
Starting off with some technical difficulties here. We take a week off, and then all of a sudden it's let's try this. Want to try now?
Anything? No.
You can't hear me either.
No, I can hear you. Great.
All right.
Lovely.
All right, we'll give it again. Can I get you without the headphones? No. Like I took mine off. You're muted.
Anything now?
Now I got you. I don't know why that was weird, but
that was weird.
We got we're rusty here, but hey, we'll jump back into it.
That has never happened before.
I know, that was bizarre. And you know what's weird? I haven't used my headphones in I don't know, I want to say maybe like the last 5 episodes I haven't used headphones. So this was the first one. I was like, let me just put it back on. It's easy enough. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but as I was saying before, man, you got to be excited right now as an Eagles fan with the playoffs around. So how you feeling? How you feeling going into this week?
Yeah. So as I was saying before this whole thing happened, yeah, excited is definitely one word, and a bit nervous is another, because we're surrounded by so many Giants fans here at Marist, obviously. So, Big Blue over here, fan base is all over it there. But like me, on paper, we're gonna get into it, but the Eagles are the better team. There's a reason they're the 1 seed. But I'm very anxious. I want this game to be played right now. I just want to see it.
Yeah, and that's always the worst feeling as a fan, is when you have a ton of friends, or you're surrounded by a ton of fans of the other team that you're going up against, and you just know they're all ready to go, ready for that opportunity to strike where they can just throw it in your face that their team won. And the fact that we both go to Marist, you definitely have a ton of Giants fans that are on campus out in full support, full masquerade. But like you said, the Eagles they've been the better team all season. So we'll dive into this game a little later, but I think we're going to start with the Steelers and kind of put a bow on their season, talk a little bit about some of the news surrounding them before we really dive into the Eagles and what the bye week meant for them, talk about the injury updates, and preview that matchup against the Giants a little bit. So we can start with the Steelers. They finished the season on a high note, getting the victory in their last game over the rival Browns. They did their end of the bargain when it came to trying to sneak into the playoffs. They had to win. They knew there was a lot that had to go on. The Patriots also lost their matchup, which the Steelers need to have happen. The one thing that didn't go the Steelers' way was that the Jets ended up losing to the Dolphins in the last week of the season, and that allowed the Dolphins to get that final wild card spot. And you know what? It's frustrating. I would have loved to see the Steelers get in, and the thing that I wish they'd gotten in. I think most football fans can agree with this this logic, is that the Steelers were ending their season, going towards the playoffs. On a high note. They were playing really good football. They were winners, I want to say, of like 5 of their last 6 games going into Week 18. Meanwhile, the Dolphins, the Jets, and the Patriots were all limping towards the playoffs,
Yeah,
while the
yeah,
Steelers were really playing some of their best football, if not their best football of the season, going towards the playoffs. So I think I don't know. Can you agree with me that from just a football fan's perspective, it would have been nice to see the Steelers in the playoffs? That would have been the team that would, because the Bengals really didn't put up. Yeah, it was close in the first half. Or excuse me, the Dolphins game was close throughout against the Bills, but I mean, to me, I wanted to see the Steelers in the playoffs because they were the team that was really firing on all cylinders towards the end of the season.
yeah. I mean, the Steelers got really hot at the end, like you said, and just I had those 3 games on, those 1 o'clock games on, and I mean there was a clear difference. I mean the Steelers were definitely a lot more confident, and I mean they beat the Browns by what, double digits, as opposed to the Dolphins and Jets game. That, I mean, they couldn't even score a touchdown. They won by 5 points, and part of that was because of a safety at the end of the game, but. And then the Patriots, I mean, they kind of held their own a bit against Buffalo, but I think everyone expected the Bills to win that game in Buffalo, especially, with all of DeMar Hamlin stuff. And I mean, that kickoff return, I mean, that was, all that stuff. So, yeah, the Steelers certainly they did their job at the end. It just wasn't enough, unfortunately.
It wasn't enough, and I mean, I don't want to, downplay the, I don't want to downplay the Dolphins too much because they did hold their own against the Bills in the playoffs. But to me, I felt like part of it was the Bills kind of playing down to their opponents a little bit. I
Yeah, they
mean,
did.
I know people are getting on Josh Allen right now, but I mean, I'm not panicking. This guy has shown up so many times in the playoffs. I mean, look back to last year's AFC Championship game. I think that was kind of a one-time thing to a certain degree. That I think we'll see the true Josh Allen back on display this week in their matchup against the Bengals. But I want to talk a little bit just because this is really the last we're going to see of the Steelers in action on the field for a while. I mean, to talk about their turnaround, I think is something to really marvel at because this is a team that a lot of people wrote off early in the season when they were, 2-6, 3-7. People were saying that their season was done. They didn't have a shot at, coming anywhere close to 500. And I mean, for them to really play as well as they did after the bye is incredibly impressive. And I mean, I have some numbers here from the Steelers offense before the bye week, the Steelers offense after the bye week. Points per game, pre-bye, 14.1, post-bye, 20.8. That's last versus 15th before the bye and after the bye. The other one that really caught my eye was rush yards per game. We know how much this Steelers team really leaned on the run game, especially later in the season. We saw Najee Harris really just take over games at times. Prior to the bye, they averaged 94.9 rush yards per game. That was 25th in the NFL. After the bye week, 146 rush yards per game. That was 7th in the NFL. So, I mean, the fact that they were really able to find their identity, that offensive line really progressed and meshed throughout the season. I think those were some of the key things they really leaned on. And the last thing, I mean, this was something that I was ripping them for earlier in the year that they completely turned around after the bye. Third down conversion percentage or efficiency. Pre-bye, 33.6%. That was 28th in the NFL. Post-bye, 54.3% conversion rate on third down. That was the best in the NFL after the bye week. So, I mean, this team really got in a groove, and it's hard for me to say, especially with such emotional wins like they had against the Raiders, like they had
Yeah.
against the Ravens, the come from behind touchdowns, the progression of Kenny Pickett. He was not turning the ball over, really rarely turned the ball over at all the second half of the year after the bye. There's a lot to be excited about as a Steelers fan next season.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like part of that turnaround obviously has to do with the run game, and it's sort of making those drives longer, and especially getting, you know, at least a good amount of yardage, first and second down. I feel like earlier on in the season it was a bit of a struggle before the bye. I feel like we saw a bit more of third and longs. Those are a lot more difficult to convert, obviously, and so going back to their identity sort of made it a bit easier, I guess, in a sense, to convert those third downs and keep drives going, because that's really where the identity was, as the Steelers, Matt Canada, sort of figured out after the bye.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm even just looking back. One of the things that I kind of hang my hat on as I go back here and look through the Steelers' schedule, this was something I've thought of before. When you go through this game by game and look at some of their losses, outside of the Bills loss, which was obviously their big blowout loss, and outside of their loss week 3 against Cleveland, where remember that touchdown was scored on the last play of the game. The Steelers fumbled it trying to do a lateral pass, and Cleveland scored. Outside of those 2 games, all of their other losses were 1-score losses. So, I mean, this team I feel was, a much better team than their record necessarily showed, and I think that they're going to be a team to watch out for next year. And I've already been saying it. They're a
Yeah.
sleeper for the division next year. AFC North, I don't see any reason why they can't contend. They beat the Bengals at the start of the year when they really had no clue what type of team they even are. Granted, you could say the same thing about the Bengals at that point, and obviously it's early season football, but I mean, this is a team that they found their identity towards the end of last season, and I don't see any reason why they're not going to kind of carry that into next year. And I think that this is a group that kind of realizes, with so many guys coming back, they realize how good, how special they can be. It's a really young roster, so I'm really excited to see, what they can kind of do next year. And, a stat that I feel like is always floated out there, the start towards every season is there's always, I think the stat is like 4 teams that made the playoffs from the year prior that then miss it that season. There's going to be those 4 teams again that made the playoffs this year that aren't going to make it next season. And I think the Steelers are absolutely going to be a team that jumps into one of those AFC playoff spots.
Man, yeah, you've been saying, you've texted me that you're like, I know I have that text saved somewhere where you said, yeah, I'm booking it right now. The Steelers are made to the postseason next year, which yeah, definitely. I mean, it's Mike Tomlin, one of the best coaches in the NFL. And considering what he had to work with, which I feel like compared to other years wasn't as good, but the fact that he brought the best out of his players, out of his coaches, it's really telling. He still does not have a losing season ever. Like that's crazy. That just shows you how good he is as a coach, as a person. I mean, his players play hard for him, and that's very clear on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, anybody out there, whether you're a Steelers fan or not, that thinks that Mike Tomlin needs to go is absolutely kidding themselves.
Yeah.
This guy commands a locker room like no other head coach around the league. This guy would have a job instantaneously overnight with any other organization in the maybe not any other organization in the NFL, but with 25 different organizations in the NFL, he would have a job overnight. So the clowns out there that are saying this guy needs to go, the Steelers need to overhaul their entire house, I completely disagree with. This guy is as good as it gets in today's day and age, and as far as NFL head coaches go. And I mean, you said it yourself. Mike Tomlin's talking about how he doesn't care about the never having a season below 500. He cares about just the confetti flying at the end of the year, which is obviously trying to get back to the Super Bowl, win another Super Bowl. But I read an article in the Athletic this morning about the impact that it had for the players when they were down 2-6, 3-7 at different points of the year. The fact that they internally wanted to fight for Mike Tomlin. Miles Jack talked about it. He was with the Jaguars at points in his career where it was a dumpster fire of an organization. And he talked about, for them, if they were 2-6 in a point, there was panic all over the building. Who was losing their job? For the Steelers, he said it was complete composure. Let's get better 1 week at a time. And the Steelers absolutely did that to get to this point where they were 9-8 on the season and had a shot at the playoffs had things go the right way. But unfortunately, it didn't fall that way. And, they fall outside of it. But certainly a team that is going to be, you almost feel bad for the other teams in the AFC North at this point. I mean, obviously the Bengals have a really solid foundation there, but the Browns are a dumpster fire of an organization year after year. And now Greg Roman just parted ways. The Ravens just parted ways with Greg Roman as of today in Baltimore. Harbaugh seemed extremely disgruntled after the loss in the playoffs this year. Who knows what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore? So, I mean, the Steelers, just the model of consistency, not only for NFL organizations, but really just for teams in professional sports. This is how you run a professional sports organization. Pittsburgh's been doing it right.
Yeah, and I might argue that this season, when they were 2-6, this might have been Mike Tomlin's best season in terms of like turning a season around, essentially, after being down. After losing 6 games, like that's quite incredible. Again, credit to Mike Tomlin and for the players, really fighting for him and for this organization as a whole.
100%. I've heard people say that you could make the case this guy deserves to be a Coach of the Year finalist, frankly, for how he's been able to turn this team around. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. I would have to look into it a little. I really honestly haven't even thought about, the Coach of the Year. I think obviously Nick Sirianni is going to have a say in that as well. But
maybe.
I mean the turnaround that he's done with this organization from where they started to where they are now, from the start of the season to how they ended, is fantastic. And I mean, when you talk about consistency, when you talk about the Steelers organization, when you talk about, not making rash decisions, I guess one of the decisions that was made recently, or lack thereof, a decision, was the decision to hold on to Matt Canada and bring him back for one more season. He's got one more year on his contract. So I mean, I kind of get it that they aren't moving on from him because of the progression you saw to this point. I mean, the Steelers were a borderline playoff team. Are you going to fire your offensive coordinator, especially when they were starting to click towards the end of the year? Now, I'm going to give my 2 cents on it. Really, I think the question that you need to ask yourself, and this is the question that I wrote down here, is Matt Canada the offensive mind that can get the best out of Kenny Pickett? That's really what it comes down to. Or is it a setback to have? Would you be better off making the change now in Kenny Pickett's development to a different offensive coordinator? So that's what the question really comes down to in my mind. And I'm assuming that was the conversation that was had within the Steelers building as to what to do with the offensive coordinator position. But for me, I don't think Matt Canada has staying power as an offensive coordinator in the NFL. I mean, just the way that his system is run, the way that he calls plays, the lack of success in the red zone, I think, has to be part of it. And I mean, even the season, I know the critique on him in the past, or the critique as to why his system didn't work in the past when Ben Roethlisberger was there, was that it didn't allow him to open up the full playbook. But,
Yeah.
At this point, it's still not like the offense was firing on all cylinders. So this year is going to this upcoming season is going to be a prove-it year for Matt Canada in the final year of his deal.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one way to look at it is perhaps the Steelers thought, we keep him another season and you sort of touched on this, open up the playbook a bit more. Kenny Pickett can, be a bit more comfortable, become more acclimated with it during the offseason, during the season, and maybe that will push this offense to another level. I mean, I'm going to compare this to Jalen Hurts a little bit, because he obviously didn't have an offensive coordinator in back-to-back years. And then you see the results now. This year is the second year with Shane Steichen, and you see practically an MVP. I'm not going to say Kenny Pickett's going to be an MVP next season, but there's always that bet that this offense could get better. Kenny Pickett's going to keep developing, keep growing as a passer. As we even saw this past season, he grew tremendously and really commanded the offense towards the second half of the season. So really, it's it has its benefits, it has its question marks and all that, but I'm not gonna say it's right or wrong. I'm kind of with
I
you
know
that they should have let him go.
it's hard to play both sides, because I like I said, I feel that Canada isn't a long-term offensive
Yeah,
coordinator in the NFL, just the way that his style works. But when you see the progress that they made towards the end of the season, and you hear Kenny Pickett talk after the season ends about how he felt that he really progressed in Matt Canada's system to the point where he felt like by the end of the year, his exact words were, he felt like he owned the offense. He wasn't playing in the offense anymore. And when you hear that, yeah, there's definitely room for growth. The real test is going to be if we get to next season and we see what we saw in the last, 6 weeks of the season. If that's the ceiling of the Steelers offense, then, frankly, that's just not good enough, because it is
right.
an offensive league nowadays. You got to put up points. I think I read a stat. The Steelers have never scored 30 points with Matt Canada as the head coach, which is kind of astounding, with Matt Canada as the offensive coordinator, excuse me, which is kind of astounding. So it is going to come down to, all right, Matt Canada, unlock the playbook here. You got to do it this year with a mobile quarterback. The excuse of Ben Roethlisberger being, kind of, slow, not wanting a lot of pre-snap movement, that was out the door this year. Now you're not going to have the excuse of Kenny Pickett needing to adjust to the system. Everybody knows what the expectation is coming to the year, and we're going to need to see progression from this offense next year. Or else, to me, the first culprit that could be on the hot seat is Matt Canada. Now, obviously, we're talking a little bit further down the road, but yeah, am I happy that Matt Canada is still the offensive coordinator? Not necessarily, but I understand the logic behind not firing him at this point, and it kind of works out perfectly that you just have one more year of his contract left.
Yeah, and then you decide that you stick with him, you move on. But I do agree with you that they shouldn't have kept him. But it
Yeah,
is what it is. I mean,
yeah,
that's just how it worked out.
yeah, and it's all going to come down really the main thing is going to be, we can't see a setback. We can't see a setback from Kenny Pickett because to me, yeah, the first thing I'm going to point to is Matt Canada. But um,
Yeah.
other than that, not a lot of other Steelers news at this point. But as we continue and hopefully the Eagles make a deep run here and we continue to do these episodes, knock on wood through a deep playoff run into the month of February. Any Steelers news that continues to pop up, we'll break down. And that being said, Ricardo, here we go. Eagles playoff football. We got it back now, and they're coming off the 1 week bye. So what I kind of want to start at this point. Like let's wrap up the regular season a little bit because we didn't get to do that. Obviously, it was a close game where the Giants weren't playing a lot of their starters in week 18, but the Eagles still got the job done and secured that first round bye. And we talked about how important it was for them to get that week off, the extra week to game plan, the extra week to rest guys up, the extra week to get their roster healthy, the extra week to get Jalen Hurts healthy. I mean, how big is that?
I mean, having an extra week it definitely helped. I mean, this week Jalen Hurts was not on the injury report. That was the one thing I looked for in the injury report. I was like, all right, where's Jalen Hurts? And each day he wasn't there. I was like, okay, he's fine. He's gonna be good to go. He's gonna be back to his full self, hopefully. And so that's really encouraging as an Eagles fan, obviously. And it's definitely bad news for the Giants because that just opens up, as I said, like the offense. Another facet of this offense that wasn't there back in Week 18 when they played against the Giants in Philly, 22-16, I believe the score was. And I mean, you could tell that the whole game plan then was to limit how many hits Jalen Hurts took. I mean, he only took off. He had a QB sneak, and that was about it. And he got sacked a few times, and he just like went down. And really, it was just quick passing game, really, really conservative. And for all those Eagles fans that are worried about, I mean, they moved the ball against the Giants, and they just couldn't finish in the red zone. There was like 4 trips in the red zone. They couldn't score on any of them. They had to settle for Jake Elliott field goals. I mean, if you think about it the other way, if the Eagles convert on any of those, it's not as close as it would have been. So in the sense that I'm not worried about the Eagles moving the ball against the Giants. I think they will. It's just Jalen Hurts' health was the priority back then in Week 18, and obviously that helps. That's translated over to this upcoming game Saturday, which is gonna be. I mean, Philly's gonna be rocking. That stadium's gonna be loud as hell. So
now, before we get to the game a little bit, I do want to talk about the fact that this week, I mean, I said the most vital part of having this week off wasn't even the home field advantage through the playoffs, wasn't even the fact of the extra week of the preparation. It was for this Eagles team to get healthy. Now, I'm looking at the injured report right now posted on the actual Eagles site. I mean, can we go? Do you mind if we go through this a little bit and just touch base? Because I want to know the latest that you're hearing, and I want to know your perspective on what you think of this. I mean, I see from today's practice, the full participants were Linval Joseph, Robert Quinn, which is good news. And really the biggest news to me, he was a limited participant the last 2 days, but Lane Johnson, full participant today.
Yep.
Arguably the best offensive lineman in football. If he's healthy, that's a huge addition.
Yeah, I mean, there's this stat where the Eagles have a losing record without Lane Johnson. I mean, that's very telling. He is arguably the best right tackle in the league. And I mean, you saw it against the Saints, you saw it against the Giants that Jack Driscoll is really not that good. And in that Saints game, he let up like 3 sacks to Cam Jordan. So getting Lane Johnson back is absolutely critical. The fact, I mean, he might still be playing through that groin injury or whatever, but he's still even having him back to some capacities, but a huge benefit as opposed to Jack Driscoll. I'm sorry, I'm absolutely roasting Jack Driscoll, but that's just how it worked out.
Now, two other injury aspects, real quick, is I know Brandon Graham was dealing with some illness, not a COVID illness, but he was a limited participant today. So I mean, it's an injury. I'm sure he's going to go, so that's fine. Yeah. And then the other one that's kind of the blow, but I don't know if it was really expected. Well, not that it wasn't really expected, but Avonte Maddox is still out. How do you think that they're going to kind of fill his void at the slot corner position?
Well, sort of how they did against the Giants on Week 18. They sort of on multiple snaps. They had C.J. Gardner Johnson lined up in the slot, Reed Blankenship over safety position, Marcus Epps on the other. So I think they're going to roll with that. If it's three safeties or use them as a slot corner. So I think they have a solution. I think they're going to figure. I mean, they sort of played with that against the Giants Week 18. So that's how I see it playing out. I don't really see how else they would do it because Josiah Scott isn't all that good in the slot in Avonte Maddox's place. So I think keeping Josiah Scott maybe sort of limited in a limited role would be ideal for the Eagles.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I mean, outside of that, it seems like the Eagles have gotten back to pretty, fully healthy. They've just rested a lot of guys this week, which I think is kind of key. I mean, I know Josh Sweat has been, not practicing this week due to rest. Landon Dickerson, both of those guys were dealing with stuff towards the end of the season, if I remember correctly. Josh Sweat for sure was. So I mean, just resting guys, and I mean that's the Nick Sirianni way. So they've been rolling with it, all season and even longer than that, and no reason to stop that now. And I mean, I'll say it: if this Eagles roster is healthy, it's the deepest that's left in the NFL playoffs here. So I like the chances of that, but. I'm not sure if there's anything else you have to add on the injury front of things before we kind of dive into previewing this game a little bit.
If the Eagles win, Avonte Maddox is expected to have a chance of playing at the NFC Championship game. So we'll see if the Eagles can win and if he actually does come back.
Yeah, which I mean, I think we even said this, but the game he went down, he was looking so good too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of disappointing that he went down when he was playing really good football at the time. But yeah, I mean, hopefully the Eagles can continue a run here and get him back healthy potentially. But outside of that, I know you were talking about your concern level a little bit at the start. I know you've mentioned to me off air you think this game is going to be a little bit closer than maybe what people are saying. And this is a Giants team that they looked pretty good last week. So given what they did against the Vikings last week, given the way they were able to still put up, over 30 points against the Vikings, what do you make of the Giants coming into this game specifically?
Well, I'll start off by saying this. The Vikings defense was one of the worst. I think it was the worst going into the playoffs. So that's sort of discrediting the Giants offense a little bit, but what they did in terms of, I mean, Daniel Jones running the ball, he had 17 rushes for 78 yards. Saquon had 2 rushing touchdowns for 53 yards. I mean, that's something that is going to be a problem. And I think the biggest key for this Eagles defense, I'm not really worried about the pass catchers the Giants have. Darius Slayton, he's all right. I'm blanking on the other one that
Isaiah Hodgins.
Richard James. Yeah, Isaiah Hodgins.
He's actually been a limited participant in practice this week too.
Yeah, so I'm like, they're solid. They're not better than Darius Slay. They're not better than James Bradbury. They're not better than C.J. Gardner Johnson. So on the back end, I think they're fine. It's really controlling, the line of scrimmage, which I think they do have the advantage in, especially when it comes to getting to the quarterback. Hassan Reddick with 16 sacks this season. I mean, this team overall had 70. 4 players in double digits. They're all going to be on the field. So that's one thing. Keeping Daniel Jones in the pocket, really setting the edge and trying to limit Saquon Barkley. I mean, I'll say this. Saquon Barkley is definitely a lot healthier than he was when they played back in week 14 when he was dealing with that neck injury. Didn't have, I believe he only had like 40 yards. So I think less than that. So he's definitely going to be he's going to play a bigger role in this game. And so will Daniel Jones's rushing. So
yeah, the thing with Daniel Jones that I was just kind of looking at his season numbers before we hopped on air, and something that really surprised me, it kind of caught me off guard. I didn't even realize it. He only has 5 interceptions on the season. He has just really kind of protected the football. And I mean, I know fumbles has been an issue of his in the past, but I mean, to me, I think you're dead right on Daniel Jones. Is if you can set the edge, keep him in the pocket, force him to make the throws. I mean, you talked about how many times he rushed the football. in that game against the Vikings. If you can keep him in the pocket, I think that's how you can kind of force him to really have to beat you with his arms. And that's where I'm in agreement with you. That's where I would take the Eagles corners over that matchup against the Giants wide receivers. And I think that's kind of where the bread and butter is going to be. Now, again, the one X factor is if the Giants can get the running game going with Saquon Barkley. So, the onus is going to kind of be on Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, Javon Hargrave, all the guys up the middle to really, hone him in and slow him down. And even out of the backfield, too. He's a threat catching the ball out of the backfield for sure. So to prevent him there as well, I think is going to be key.
Yeah, that's the other thing I'm worried about. Him out of the Saquon Barkley out of the backfields. The Eagles are, what is it, 16th in yards per carry? Or sorry, where's the stat here? Oh, I forgot to mention this. The Eagles are 31st in yards per carry against quarterbacks, so second worst, 6.5 yards per carry allowed. And then against Saquon, I had it written down here. Against pass catching backs, I believe they're middle of the pack. So again, those two players are going to have to be limited to some capacity. And the weak spot of the Giants is definitely up in the middle, the guards, the center. You might even say Evan Neal, the rookie right tackle. So again, on paper, the Eagles front should handle business, but will they is a totally different question. I don't think the Eagles will get as many sacks as they did back as when they did in week 14 when they got 7. I think Ryan Dable, the offense it's really gonna be on getting the ball quick out of Daniel Jones's hand. Really just getting it out, just playing quick up, and really controlling the clock, because that's how just about every team that's beaten the Eagles has won.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think that if they can get back to some semblance of that week 14 formula when they beat the Giants of, apply the pressure and we'll flip things over to the offense in a second here, but, apply pressure and kind of build the lead where the Giants really have to kind of pass their way out of it, I think is going to be so key, because that's not really what they want to do. They want to get Daniel Jones running. They want to get the ball to Saquon Barkley because he's without a doubt their most talented playmaker on offense. So, that's what they're going to want to do. And if the Eagles can slow that down early and put some points on the board, it's going to be key. So let's kind of flip it over a little bit to the Eagles offensive side of things. And what do you have your eye on as far as it comes to the Eagles attacking this Giants defense?
Man, Jalen Hurts versus the blitz. Wink Martindale is the most blitz-happy defensive coordinator in the NFL. I mean, they send pressure 44.7% of the snaps. Dexter Lawrence alone got like a record for defensive linemen of total pressures last week against the Vikings. So really just how Jalen Hurts handles that. And I know against in week 18 against the Giants, he didn't handle it very well. Granted, his shoulder injury and all that. But I think as the season has progressed, I think Jalen Hurts has gotten better at it. It's just that one game against the Giants, he wasn't quite good. So the Eagles, Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen are really going to have to incorporate more, quick routes, hot routes, whether that be Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Zach Pascal. I feel like those three guys are really good in short yardage situations, especially Devontae Smith. So really getting the ball out. And even, I mean, this is a big part, like I said, that Jalen Hurts is not in the injury report. That means he's probably going to be running the ball a bit more himself, going to be able to scramble a bit more out of the pocket. So I think those few things are going to, limit this pass, or at least the number of blitzes that the Giants throw at him. Because, I mean, they're going to have a supply on it. If they're sending blitzers at him almost half the time, it's some of those times he's going to get out. Some of those times he'll just check it down. So it's really pick your poison for the defense. It's just how you want to play against this Eagles offense that can be so dynamic. And I didn't even mention the running attack, really. Just one of the best, I believe, third best in the NFL running the ball. So it's really tough. It's going to be really tough for the Giants to sort of contain this offense, especially now that Jalen Hurts is healthy.
I feel like there's a lot of ways that the Eagles, whatever the Giants decide to do, because I feel like if the Giants decide to send a lot of pressure and they kind of do that classic Wink Martindale send the pressure, send the blitz. I think that there's absolutely a mismatch there with Devontae Adams, especially, or not Devontae Adams, excuse me, Devontae Smith. If they move him into the slot, or they get a matchup advantage with Dallas Goedert on kind of those quick passes. And I mean, I for the Giants at corner, they don't really go much deeper than Adoree Jackson.
Yeah.
And I mean, if Adoree Jackson is busy trying to worry about locking up A.J. Brown, I think we could definitely see Devontae Smith, especially if they move him in against some of the Giants' slot corners, really having a big day and, receiving a lot of those quick passes that we're talking about. If that's how the Giants are going to, try to stop this Eagles defense. But again, if they then kind of drop back a little bit more into pressure, take some of that blitzing away, it's going to allow some space for the run game to really flourish. So I do like what the Eagles can do to kind of counter whatever Wink Martindale decides to do on the defensive side of the football.
Here's the other thing about the passing game. I think Dallas Goedert is going to have a really big game. I mean, all season the Giants have struggled against tight ends. Last week against the Vikings, T.J. Hawkinson had 10 catches for 129 yards. So this could be a really big game for Dallas Goedert. I don't believe he played against the Giants back in Week 14. He was injured still at that point with that shoulder injury. So this could be a massive game for him, if anything. Him and Devontae Smith, I believe. But
yeah, those are two guys that I like a lot in this game to really have big days and really, kind of carry the load for this offense in the passing attack.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's where the Eagles went. It's definitely between Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith. I think A.J. Brown might even get doubled, to be honest. I mean, he's just so good. Such a good receiver, one of the best in the league, honestly. So, it's gonna open up more opportunities for other pass catchers. And yeah, I mean, that's who I expect to really shine this game.
Is there anybody on the Giants defense that scares you, where you're like, this is the guy that could absolutely wreck this game for us?
Dexter Lawrence is definitely that player. As I said before, he had I don't have the exact number, but he broke a record for number of pressures in a playoff game. I can't remember which exactly it was, but the point of that being, he's their best defender there, and he can definitely blow up any play, any snap, whether it be a run, a pass. That's one of the hardest things for a QB. When pressures were going up right in your face, to try and avoid that. That's something that's really difficult, and it really gets a quarterback off their spot. So that's who the offensive line has to hone in on. They have to focus their attention on, whether it be doubling him or running some more trap plays, where the tight end comes in and blocks on run plays. I think they really got to focus their attention on Dexter Lawrence because he's been huge for the Giants.
I think that's absolutely an underrated matchup that not a lot of people are talking about. Even outside, I agree with everything you're saying on Dexter Lawrence, but just this defensive line of the Giants, when you talk about the rookie Kayvon Thibodeau as well, if a lot of the focus is going on a guy like Dexter Lawrence, he's going to get one-on-one matchups against maybe a guy like Lane Johnson, who's not 100%. Now, I'm not trying to discredit Lane Johnson at all. I said earlier in this broadcast, I think you can make the case he's the best tackle in all of the NFL. But then there's also the question of Azeez Ojulari, the other young edge rusher for the Giants. I think he is a limited participant in practice.
Yes.
So there's potentially another little wrinkle in there as to how this matchup could unfold. But I think right in the trenches of this Eagles offensive line against this Giants defensive line is going to be a big factor in whether the Eagles can really put up some points and make the Giants play from behind, or if this thing is really going to be a dogfight throughout.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, if not the best, when they're fully healthy. So this could be quite. I mean, I think they should hold their own against the defensive line. But yes, it has gotten better. But I think the Eagles are just a little bit better, and they have the best offensive line coach in Jeff Stoutland. So he always knows how to get his guys ready, get his guys prepared to go out and play.
So I know you've said that you think that this game is going to be closer than maybe people are giving it credit to. I think people expect it. I feel like people are almost talking it up a little bit as being a close game because it's the rivalry game. Meanwhile, others are kind of saying oh, the Eagles should be able to handle this. There's too many reasons why they're going to actually dominate the Giants if they're healthy, and they kind of play to the level they played in their first matchup of the season. The spread right now, I believe, is 7.5. What do you make of that? Do you think it's going to be closer than that? Or do you think that the Eagles could kind of, cover that mark?
I mean, I have a score prediction. I don't know how confident I feel in it at the moment, but I have 27-22. There's something about division games in the playoffs. They just are because teams know each other so well. Two rivals, really know each other so well. It's just there. No one really has an advantage when you think. I mean, yeah, one team might have better players, but when you've played against an opponent, twice in the season, you got to play them a third time. It's like you know what they want to do. You kind of are just familiar with it. Obviously, adjustments will be made in all of those things, but just those factors alone, I feel like will make this game close. So I say 27-22 Eagles. So I told people, I've been telling people, I think the Giants are going to cover, but I just outright, I'm picking the Eagles.
All right, fair. And I think you make a very good point about the division rivalry aspect in the playoffs. I mean, look no further. I guess to a certain extent, the Bills and Dolphins. But again, I said earlier, I think the Bills kind of played down to the Dolphins a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, even the Ravens and Bengals. I mean, the Ravens playing with obviously their backup quarterback Tyler Huntley, and I mean they hung around with the Bengals all game, really made that thing close to normal. And I think that it was the fact that it was that division rivalry, the third time those teams were playing this season. You really get to know your opponent. I think that's absolutely a huge factor in these division rivalry games. So I mean, as far as I go, I'm picking the Eagles in this one. That spread is a pretty lofty number, but just to be a little bit different, I'll say we'll go 28-20 Eagles.
Okay.
28-20 Eagles. They'll come up on top in this one. And I do like Devontae Smith to have a huge game.
Yeah, I really hope so. As long as the Eagles win, I don't want to hear. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself if the Giants end up winning this game. I'll probably transfer or something. But
I feel
I could not handle that.
Ricardo's dropping out with one semester left if the Eagles win.
Yeah, I've had enough. I can't. I would never. But anyway, yeah.
Well, dude, I think one aspect you touched on this like briefly at the top when we started talking about this matchup, but such a huge factor that's going to play a role in this is the fact that it's being played at home for the Eagles. I mean, that's a huge advantage that the Eagles have any game they play, and obviously when it's a division opponent, though that Eagles fan base is going to be absolutely riled up, ready to go, ready to support the Birds. So I mean, I think that's going to be an absolute huge factor in this one as well. And I don't know if they're going to necessarily rattle the Giants, but if it is to be the case that could happen, this Eagles fan base is going to make their presence felt.
Hey, Philly is a football city. That's all I'm gonna say. I mean, with all their teams, they ride and die. I mean, they live and die. They live and breathe this. All their Philly sports teams, but especially the Eagles. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be electric at the lake. I know. I wish I could be there. That would be something. But yeah, it's certainly something the Giants might have to keep in mind. I'm expecting a few false starts here and there because the Eagles fans just know how to get loud. It's incredible every time I've gone to a game just how loud it gets.
Yeah, and the playoffs is going to be on another level. Now, do you have anything else you want to touch on with this game specifically? Because I do want to ask you about maybe looking past it a little bit, not from the Eagles' perspective, but is there anything else you want to touch on with this game specifically before we move on?
No, that is all I have.
That's it. All right. He gave us his prediction, everybody. Take it to the bank. Ricardo says Giants are covering, but the Birds got the win in the bag. As far as the other matchup goes, we've got 3 NFC East teams in the divisional round here, which last year and the year prior, we were talking about this being the worst division in football. All of a sudden, a turnaround now, and we've got Giants, Cowboys, and Eagles all representing the NFC at this stage, along with the 49ers. I think I brought up this point on one of our previous shows, and Chris Collinsworth mentioned it at one point in one of the NBC broadcasts. But when you are kind of playing against these teams, you're playing in such a tough division, the NFC East, where the Giants are going up against the Eagles, and the Eagles are going up against the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are going up against the Commanders team that was hanging around late, and they're all playing each other. It kind of hardens your team. It hardens your roster a little bit, makes you a little bit more playoff tough, and maybe we're seeing that come to fruition a little bit more as 3 teams from the NFC East remain out of the final 8. Do you buy into that? And what do you think of the fact that the Cowboys are going into San Francisco this week?
I mean, when we talk about rivalries, especially in the NFC East, I mean, I feel like for so many years, it's been, I mean, they very clearly hate each other. There's such a hatred between all these fans. And I mean, I'm one of the nicer ones. Yeah, I still hate all of them, but yeah, it's. I can see what Chris Collinsworth means by that, but sort of toughens a team, and makes them a bit more. I don't know, dig in a bit more motivated, and all these other things you want to talk about. But yeah, I think that certainly might play a factor in this. And yeah, as a and the Cowboys, I would say going into this matchup, man, I
Well, let me
obviously,
phrase it to you this way.
yeah,
Dak Prescott looked really good in the wild card round. Brock Purdy looked really good in the wild card round. We know how dynamic the 49ers, I believe, if I'm saying this correctly, I don't think they've lost a game since Brock Purdy took over a quarterback.
nope.
The Cowboys, played arguably one of their best games of the season against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the wild card round. Obviously, you're touching on it with the Giants and the Eagles playing each other in that division familiarity. You could have that if the Eagles and Cowboys meet in the NFC Conference Championship game. Which team, as an Eagles fan, would you rather face if the Eagles can get to the Conference Championship? Would you rather face the Niners or the Cowboys?
I mean, probably the Niners. I just don't want to see the Cowboys again. I also just hate them, like I said. So if the Eagles were to go on and lose and the Cowboys advance, I would hate it. I would, yeah, that's a whole different thing. If they lose to the Niners, arguably the second best team, maybe even the same level as the Eagles, fine, okay. But it's like, and it's against Brock Purdy. I'd love to see his poise, his composure in Philly in such a hostile environment.
And a really good defense he'd have to go up against as well. A
Yeah,
defense that gets to the
exactly.
quarterback.
Yeah, so I would rather see the 49ers. As good as they are, I'd still rather see them. And because they haven't played all season either, so that's
Dude,
another factor.
I mean, the NFC, I know, we haven't touched on the AFC, it's fine, but there's so many storylines of how this could unfold in the NFC. You could get the Cinderella Giants, a roster nobody expected to do anything this season, making a run to the conference finals. You could get the Eagles and the 49ers matching up in what could potentially be a battle of these two teams people have said have been on a collision course really since halfway through the season in the NFC. You could get the Cowboys going up against the division rival Eagles, two teams that absolutely hate each other. Jerry Jones trying to get back to a Super Bowl. I mean, there's so many storylines that are coming out of the NFC right now. And man, it's going to be exciting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, there's only one I want to see happen. So yeah, so the first Eagles got to get the job done on Saturday. So
They got to get the job done on Saturday. I think that's a good way to end it, man. You have anything else you want to add as we close things up here?
fly, Eagles, fly, go Birds.
Go Birds. We will see how it all unfolds. Thank you for tuning in whenever you did. It's always a blast. We will be back next week breaking down this divisional round matchup and hopefully, knock on wood, redoing a conference championship game as well. That is it for it. We will see you guys next time. Bye-bye now.